Good morning, everyone. You're very welcome to this morning's Enterprise Ireland Water webinar, UK Water Sector Trends and Opportunities 2022 to 2025. I'm Darragh Cotter, a Senior Market Advisor with Enterprise Ireland, based here in our London office, working together with my London colleague Luke Newcomb and Enterprise Ireland Sector Consultant Lee Horrocks. We act as a practical support for Irish companies looking to establish themselves or grow their footprint in the UK municipal water market. Enterprise Ireland coordinates a well-established cluster of over 60 water and wastewater companies who are well positioned to service the UK's municipal and industrial water sectors and the respective capital and growth objectives. This cluster of Enterprise Ireland client companies provide products and service solutions in areas such as water scarcity, climate change and resilience, rising energy costs, increased regulation, increased quality requirements and aging infrastructure. In 2020, the UK water sector embarked on Asset Management Plan, or AMP7, a 5-year infrastructural spending cycle worth approximately £51 billion. As we approach the midway point of AMP7, it seems like a good point to take stock of how this spending cycle is progressing, the challenges the UK water sector has experienced, and assess the opportunities that might remain for supply chain companies. Ofwat, the UK water regulator, has set out a number of priority themes for AMP7, which will guide today's session. They are environmental protection, carbon reduction and resilience, digital agenda, customer service, collaboration and innovation, and value for money. To help bring us through today's discussion, we are delighted to have with us a number of the leading sector experts from the Irish supply chain who have firmly established their respective businesses into the UK municipal water market. Sean Stevens, UK General Manager with EPS Group and also Non-Executive Director with British Water, will provide an overview of the sector's environmental protection and carbon reduction agenda. This will be an important insight into an ever-growing priority. Gerard O'Keefe, Managing Director, Utilities and Infrastructure with Total Mobiles and former MD at Geopal, will talk to us about the digital agenda in the UK water sector and how digital solutions are key enablers for the effective delivery of AMP cycles. Paul Gardner, Managing Director at Glenagua, is also with us today. Paul will take a look at the importance of collaboration and innovation in the sector and what this means in practice. Kicking us off today, though, will be Lee Horrocks of LCH Executive Limited. Lee has been working as an expert consultant with Enterprise Ireland UK for almost 2 years now, helping individual Irish companies to accelerate their activities in the UK water sector. To help set the scene for the presentations and discussions to follow, Lee will delve a bit deeper into Ofwat's priorities for AMP7. Towards the end of the session, Lee will also assess the importance of value for money to both the regulator, the water companies, and Tier 1 contractors working in the industry. Lastly, we will then hear from my colleague Luke, who will provide some insights into the next spending cycle, AMP8, and what opportunities that this might provide for the Irish supply chain. I'd like to, on behalf of Enterprise Ireland, sincerely thank all of our speakers again for their input this morning. Their experience as real industry leaders is invaluable to the wider Irish supply chain seeking to work in the UK water sector. Some very quick housekeeping. If you have any questions or comments, you can submit them via the Q&A or chat tab function on the Zoom sidebar, and we will relay these during the Q&A at the end. For now, though, I'd like to hand you over to Lee Horrocks to kick the presentations off this morning. Lee, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Darragh. Good morning, presenters, and good morning, all attendees. I think you'll hear a lot of the phrases that Darragh has just said quite regularly during the course of this presentation. In effect, they become bywords for what AMP7 is around and what the sector needs to grow and develop through AMP7 and into AMP8. At the beginning, during this sort of 3 or 4 or 5 slides, I'm just going to talk about what will be Ofwat's position. We had hoped to get a representative from Ofwat, but for a number of reasons that actually wasn't possible today. So I'm going to give you their view as if they were sitting independently, which they do, above the water sector. So Luke, if we could have the first slide, please. Thank you. So what has Ofwat approved for PR19? You might ask, what is PR19? Well, it's period 19, and it's the phrase that the regulator uses for him setting up what will happen in what turns out to be AMP7 between 2020 and 2025. So there are a number of key things that they did and they have set up and they have put in place to allow the spend profile to happen across the 2025 period. So the first thing which is important to see is that he's created a decrease in the customers' bills across that period in real terms of about 12%. So overall, every single individual company, business in the UK over the next 5 years will see a 12% reduction in their water bills. So actually the regulator is saying you can pay the water companies less, but the water companies have to get less money, providing they make clear sector improvements. And there's some key improvement criteria, which we'll come to in a little while. And actually, he's put in place penalties for not meeting your expectations or my expectations as a customer. Prior to AMP7, customers were really not treated anywhere near the level that they should be treated compared to other sectors, other utilities, banking, for example. So the whole idea is to raise customers' expectations and for the water companies and the supply chain that work with the water companies to meet those expectations. He's allowed a spend, as Dara said before, of about 51 billion across all the water and wastewater and the water-only companies over the 5-year period. About 29 billion of that is operational spend. What does that mean? That means money spent every day to get water to come out of people's taps and to take away the wastewater that comes out of showers, bathrooms, toilets, etc., and deal with it. And he's allowed 22 billion to spend on new infrastructure, new assets, new things, actually to maintain, if not grow, the standard of the asset base that the water companies have, and to set themselves up for future requirements. What does that mean? It actually means that there's been an overall reduction of 6% of spend on PR14, which was the previous period, 2015 to 2020. So overall, what does it say? The water companies are asked to do a lot more for less. And the other thing that he has done is look to promote risk-taking across everything that the water companies do. Next slide, thanks, Luke. First click. So it's important to say here that the UK water sector, and I believe it's very similar in Ireland, is historically really conservative, very risk averse. They won't do anything that would actually make them, in effect, fail any of the service provisions that they have. The regulator is trying to change that. Next click. So Ofwat made a number of statements on where and how the water companies need to grow, how they need to develop, how they need to improve their performance in AMP7. And all these themes will continue, and there'll probably be more when we go beyond AMP7 into AMP8, which I'm sure Luke will talk about later. Next click. So what do they need to do? They need to improve customer service, and they have 2 measures, CMEX and DMEX. I'm not going to go into the detail of that. I'll do a little bit more of that later. Next click. They're looking to raise the customer's value for money. And we'll talk a little bit later today about what does value for money mean as for the customer. Next click. They're looking for the water companies to collaborate. And really that is driven by the fact that to date, all the water companies sort of say, you know, I am Thames Water, I am Severn Trent, I am Yorkshire Water. I know everything I need to know. I don't really need to talk to my competition in effect. And the regulator has said, no, you need to learn from each other. You need to help each other. You need to support each other, and you need to grow the sector together. Next click. You also need to innovate. You need to look at new technologies, new capabilities, new ways of working, so that actually we can take what is in effect a sector which is probably still 20 or 30 years behind other key sectors in the UK and bring them forward at an accelerated pace. Next click. Part of that is to use digital technologies, and we're going to hear quite a bit more of that later about what the technologies the regulator is looking for the sector to pick up on and utilize. Next click. We obviously need to keep improving the environment. That goes for any part of any sector in the UK and throughout the world, but there are some key things that we need to think about doing. Final click. And as you would expect, everybody needs to reduce their carbon footprint, either what they do themselves or what their supply chain does within supporting them. Next slide. So customer measure of expectation is one of the key measures that the regulator is using to demonstrate the performance of the water companies. They are publishing league tables every quarter to show the order in which the water companies are performing. They actually have penalties for people that are underperforming, and actually they have to pay money back to the regulator. And they're also publishing innovation league tables to show where the water companies are in innovating, in doing things differently, in using new techniques to actually be able to see that the water companies are taking on board the drive that the regulator is pushing for. And probably a very important message here is that all the things that they're put in the public domain are in effect share price sensitive, which means that chief executives, CFOs, CTOs, CIOs of all the major PLCs are absolutely focused on improving customer service. They're focused on being innovative. They're focused on spending the money and creating value for money appropriately. All of those things mean that the sector needs help and needs support in the next 3-4 years and beyond. And now we're going to talk a little bit more about each of the key things that the regulator is looking for, which hopefully people on this call will be able to help. So I'm going to hand you over to Sean Stevens, who's going to talk about carbon reduction and resilience and environmental protection. Over to you, Sean.
Many thanks, Lee. Great summary there of the regulatory background, if you like, within the market. Just to introduce myself very quickly, my name's Sean Stevens. I'm General Manager of EPS Water, which is the UK subsidiary of the EPS Group, based in Mallow, County Cork. We've been in the market here in the UK since 2008 now. We've been through through 3 AMP cycles in total now, and you know, interesting and challenging times, but looking forward to what the rest of the current AMP brings us. So next slide, please. This really is just a reflection of what Lee's discussed just now about the changing priorities in the market and where we are currently in AMP7 and looking ahead into AMP8. So I won't go through this in complete detail, but I think just to reiterate what Lee said about customer, I think, you know, it goes back 10 years that finally the industry started listening to customers, and now we're really starting to move into an arena of comprehensive customer service and social value. Which is going to transform the way that decisions are made and the outcomes that need to be delivered for customers. In this, I'll also talk a little bit about carbon and affordability, which all ties into whole life cost and the life cycle analysis of the assets we deliver. Resilience is important also, as is the environmental safeguarding and the net zero targets, which I'll get into as well. In the background of all of this, though, is the affordability squeeze, which Lee alluded to. We're always being asked to deliver more for less. Now, more doesn't necessarily mean more built assets. It means more outcomes, which can be a very different thing. There is a trend towards building less, no build solutions in particular, and nature-based solutions, for example. So I'll get into those a little bit over the next few slides. Just moving on. So first of all, the environmental protection, which I suppose ultimately is one of the reasons we're here. We're here to supply clean water to customers and to treat waste in an environmentally sensitive way. And there are a few themes really emerging for the current AMP cycle and probably looking forward to AMP8. Those of you who saw the news around December time will have seen there was a big, there was sort of a big splash in the media about untreated storm discharges to rivers and to the sea. And I suppose an admission to some extent that had got out of control within the industry. So what you're seeing now is new legislation being brought through, and with it will be new regulatory drivers to ensure that storm discharges are treated, not necessarily to the full extent of consent, but there is at least partial treatment of storm discharges. So money will be spent on that. There's an ongoing phosphorus removal program that really got going about 4 or 5 years ago and will continue probably for another 7 or 8 years through to 2030. There's an increasing tendency towards the use of nature-based solutions. It is constrained by land availability, but water companies are now starting to build wetlands and other similar assets downstream of their treatment plants to aid treatment and to provide new natural habitats at the same time. Micropollutants is a very big focus area, and I think will grow dramatically into AMP8. These forever chemicals that you see discussed in the media have been on the agenda for some time in this industry, and the drive to actually start treating these and remove them will continue. And then finally, microplastics, which has been on the agenda for some years, but finally we're getting to a point now where treatment investment is taking place to actually remove these in the treatment plants. So moving on. I mentioned earlier about the net zero target for 2030. This is all set out in a route map document that's been published by Water UK, and I'd advise anyone who's serious about operating in the UK market to read this. There is a summary version, which will give you a flavour as to what's needed, but the detail of it is in the main document. This really is about decarbonising the water industry. That's done through a number of measures. Water and energy saving is one example. Reduction in process emissions, which are significant. Increased use of renewable power and green gas. So bioresource factories, for example, as you see there. Making better use of the bioresources and biosolids we produce, and down to things like lower emission vehicles. So what you're going to see is adoption of a number of initiatives and innovations in the coming years, which will enhance monitoring and reporting, improve treatment processes. There will be spend to save initiatives, new programs of work where return on investment can deliver low carbon and zero carbon solutions. So it's certainly something to keep an eye out for, and to if you have technologies applicable to that, you will see good opportunities for those. Moving on. And the last area I'm focusing on today really is resilience, which is again been on the agenda for some years now. Leakage in particular, there's been a real drive to reduce leakage for the last 10 years now, and some headway has been made with particular water companies. I wouldn't say it's been improvements across the board, but leakage is definitely a big area of this. And I think what you're also seeing alongside that is improved usage of water, and for water companies increasingly trying to use less potable drinking water for applications that don't necessarily require it. Water transfer schemes are there. They are really about increasing the sources of raw water, particularly in some of the areas of the country which are prone to drought. So you have mass transfer schemes in place. An example is a major pipeline that Anglian are building currently, which will bring water from the north of their region to the south. There is also transfer schemes between water companies proposed, between Southern Water and Portsmouth Water, between Thames and Severn Trent. So those are generally large, high-value schemes. A lot of them are going to be procured outside of the standard regulatory frameworks because of the scale of them and the level of investment needed. But again, something to keep an eye out for. Asset reuse is extremely important. You often hear the term of sweating the assets. Water companies are very keen to, if they have unused assets or assets coming to the end of life, particularly concrete assets, tanks and the like, to make sure they can be reused. Build less or build nothing if possible. refitting an existing tank for a different purpose, for example, is something we see increasingly. And then lastly, really is the area around digital data and smarter asset management. So developing, capturing, processing better data to help you understand your assets much better than in the past, to operate them smartly, to optimize continuously. And a lot of that is linked back to BIM and the use of BIM in the design and build of treatment solutions. So moving on. And sitting behind this, obviously, you need drivers. So there are the regulatory demands that we've spoken about, but there are also sitting behind some of these, there are national policies. There are pressure from some of the water company shareholders, particularly those water companies that are owned by green investment banks. Public perception is becoming increasingly important, and the impact of adverse publicity was clear and in the spotlight there prior to Christmas with the storm discharges and obviously the customer care thing. And Lee's spoken to some extent already about the outcomes that are there, the CMEX and reputational and profitability. These are all extremely important to the water companies, and those are the things that will drive them to deliver these initiatives. So that's it for me. It's really just a smattering and an overview of where some of the spending priorities are going to be over the next 5 to 10 years, and may give you some areas to focus in on in terms of the market offering that Irish businesses are seeking to bring to the UK water sector. So thank you very much. What I will do now is pass you across to Jared O'Keefe.
Great. Thanks very much, Sean. Very interesting insights there. Good morning, everybody. Luke, if you move on to the next slide. My name is Jared O'Keefe. I'm Managing Director of the Utilities and Infrastructure Vertical in Total Mobile. Total Mobile are a field services management software company. So in terms of background, I started off my working career as an electronic engineer working in the telecom sector, the telecoms utility. But over the years, I've gained a lot of sector-specific expertise, working in companies where we've been managing large field-based workforces. So, you know, I'm familiar with the pain points in terms of managing a distributed workforce, getting clear visibility of what's going on, and so on. So understanding those points and having a technical background, myself and my colleagues set up Geopal in 2011 with the aim of developing digital solutions for end-to-end management of infrastructure construction projects. So at the time, looking at you know, the smartphones were starting to come out. There was you know, broadband data, cloud hosting, and data analytics, and we felt that a combination of those 4 elements could be combined to produce really cost-effective solutions for the utility sector. And I guess as a result of our focus in the sector, in particular the water sector, we were acquired by Total Mobile in 2021. So a little bit more about them at the end. So the next slide, please, Luke. So just to tie it into working with Enterprise Ireland, our first experience as Geopal working in the water sector was in Ireland back in 2014. Actually, 3 of the 4 companies installing the water meters, so the rollout of water meters across the country in 2014 onwards, 3 of the 4 companies used Geopal to manage their field teams. So that was Murphy Mainline, Coffee Group, and GMC. The 4th one, Farron's, had their own solution, but ultimately they did become a customer. So with that experience then, I suppose we turned our focus to the UK in 2016, and we worked very closely with Enterprise Ireland to get a good insight into the market. You know, the guys produce really good market guides, and you know, you have access to their research information. Following on from that, then in 2018, we signed up Kier Utilities. Now, Kier are a really large tier 1 construction partner in the UK. They've over 20,000 employees, £3.5 billion revenue, and they're using our solution to manage their contract with South West Water. So they'd have over 250 field teams in Cornwall managing the repair and maintenance of the water network there, and have since expanded the use out into several other contracts. So as you know, after that, then we were fortunate to win business with lots of other tier 1 and tier 2 contractors in the water industry. And as I say, as a result of our sector focus, we came to the attention of Total Mobile, similar company to ourselves, providing field service management software, and now we're part of the Total Mobile group. So on the next slide, as you've heard, you know, Ofwat have determined a number of priorities for asset management period 7. To me, you know, the driving the digital agenda has an impact on all of the other areas. You know, so as a result of the digital agenda driving performance and efficiency and innovation, that ultimately will lead on to reduced bills for end consumers. It will and can impact the drive to net carbon zero, and I'll explain why. Certainly can improve customer service, and the software is used to manage new infrastructure build-outs, leading to increased resilience. So if you move on, you know, we're working with both the water companies in the UK and Ireland, but also the supply chain partners. So we're working with the likes of Kier, Clancy, Murphy, and so on. And I suppose the thing is, let's look at the challenges that these companies are facing on the next slide. So whether it's repair and maintenance work or capital works or asset management, you can punch through all of those bullet points actually. You know, what the challenge is that the work is taking place over a distributed area, lots and lots of projects over a very wide area. So it's very hard to get a consolidated view as to how the business is performing. Now, you might know that the top 100 contractors, the likes of Kier and Balfour Beatty and so on, the top 100 companies in 2020 had a combined turnover of 62 billion pounds, but they had combined profits of about 960 million pounds. So a 1.5% profit margin, you know, which is really, really tight. It means that, you know, 1 or 2 projects going off the rails can drag down the profitability for the company for an entire quarter or indeed an entire year. So getting visibility of operational performance is absolutely critical. And the vast majority of their cost is labor. So maintaining high productivity levels is absolutely key. And, you know, they're in a very regulated market, so they're subject to fines for SLA breaches, you know, local authority fines and so on. And there's new targets coming down the line all the time in terms of carbon reduction and so on. So what's the solution to managing business, you know, a workforce in this scenario? So if we move on, to us, it's all about digitizing the field worker. So which is going to provide end-to-end visibility of contract performance. So what you want to do is capture the information digitally at source. You know, you can't draw insights from paper, but once you're capturing that information digitally, you're in a much better position then to analyze the data and draw insights from it. So it can be simple information. You're capturing labor hours, material usage, plant usage. You know, the field teams are completing their risk assessments, taking a photographic record of the work that they're completing, and all of this is supporting payment claims as well as providing the management information. So on the next slide, just have a graphic indicating that, you know, now you're getting a consolidated view of all of the work over a wide area in a number of key performance indicator dashboards looking at operational, commercial, health and safety, and quality metrics, helping companies to drive their business, keep them productive and keep them profitable. And the outcomes then, if you go on to the next slide, really are that because these companies are much more productive, they've improved efficiency, leading to lower costs, which of course then can, those lower costs in the supply chain lead to more affordable bills for end customers. The software that they're using is also used for route optimization, which means that you're getting the right person to the right job with the right materials. So you're minimizing their travel time, and you're maximizing their first time fix rate, so no second visits. So you're reducing carbon emission in terms of fuel usage. The software is used to push out notifications to customers to let them know when engineers are going to arrive, and update them if they get delayed due to traffic or being delays on a previous job. So you're increasing customer satisfaction. And then they have the software tools for managing these large capital works projects and minimizing the risk of project failure. So again, that's a quick run through some of the advantages of moving to a digital agenda can bring to the water sector. So with that, I think I'd like to now hand over to Paul Gardner from Glenagua, please.
Thanks, Jared. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Paul Gardner. I'm the Managing Director for Glenagua UK. And I was involved in the original expansion of Glenagua to the UK market, which had occurred started the work on that started back in 2016 or so. If you want to go to the next slide, Luke, just to give you an understanding, a bit of a flavour of where we are now at in the UK. I'll be able to just run through, we first started off with a project with the Yorkshire Water. You can actually run through the full lot there, Luke. Which was on the top right there, which was a pesticide removal plant for Yorkshire Water, and it was a project that we won because we challenged the asset, the asset standards and the conventional design. So we brought innovation in that way. We moved on to deliver a major framework, which consisted of 2 major upgrades for affinity water and valued about 45 million. And that was actually as part of a JV, so part of a collaborative partnership with Farron's Construction. And that particular project had a lot of DFMA focus, which is a key driver in the UK at the moment. We've since moved on. Then we've also landed a place on the IF 105 NI Water framework with NI Water, and we're a partner with Farron's there. And we have a place on the AMP7 framework with a complex micro framework with the Yorkshire Water, and the Lot 1 AMP7 framework with Thames Water. So we estimate the value of those two frameworks to be north of 100 million over the next 3 years. And we've actually got a strategic partner there of Atkins, who are doing our design, our civils design in that instance. So that just gives you a bit of a flavour of where we're at in the UK market and what's happened in the last, let's say, best part of 6 years. Which had a mix of both innovation, that's how we got there, and also collaboration, which I'll go to on the next slide there, Luke. So if you can click the whole lot of them. So we developed very key strategic aims to get the business to where it is now. And two of those key aims were collaboration and innovation, which are the ones highlighted there on the top right and on the bottom of the screen. So firstly, starting off with innovation, we set a clear aim as a business to, as it says there, to create and capture value through proactive innovation. And what that consisted of in our business and the way we approached innovation was to set up an innovation focus group Okay, and that was to coordinate and steer innovation within the business. We weren't a massive business. We hadn't the budgets for massive R&D and things like that. What we did was but it still needed to be coordinated and to develop that innovation within our business. We set ourselves up as being an integrator of technology and innovative technology. We also pursue the challenging of asset standards and conventional design, which is pretty unique in the UK, and that's one of the key differences I would notice in moving from the Irish business to the UK business, is that there's very, very prescriptive designs, and the clients are very, very prescriptive about what they want. And that's something we've looked to challenge and sought to bring in innovation through that way. And we've also had a strong focus on implementing digital tools, which was mentioned a couple of times already in this webinar. On the collaboration side, we had a very, very strong focus on developing collaborative relationships with clients, partners, and obviously our supply chain as well. This was a kind of a client-focused approach, non-adversarial. So a lot of the other players in the market would be big civil construction businesses there's probably a reputation perhaps for being a bit more adversarial and taking a more contractual approach. We've also set ourselves as seeking new partnerships and to show our client service. What I mean by that is getting the right partner to suit the right project. And we've been very, very open to that and open to creating long-term partnerships with either clients, supply chain, even JV partners as well. So they were two of the key approaches that allowed us to get to where we are, I suppose, over the last number of years. So I think it's important maybe to give that background. Now, if you want to move on to the next slide, Luke. So maybe just talking a bit about collaboration in the UK, some of the challenges that I've seen in with regards to collaboration in the UK. We've already spoken, and Lee mentioned the eye-watering EBITDA margins that are there. They can cause a lot of tensions. It can cause a lack of trust. There's dissimilar company cultures. So some companies they don't have collaboration in their DNA. Our clients don't have that either. There's often unclear common goals or visions, which are obviously important to have defined. Lack of boundaries or risk allocation can cause issues when it comes to collaboration, and also being clear on what to do when things go wrong. That's often an issue that restricts collaboration going in the industry. And generally finding suitable partners and companies to partner with can be difficult. It can be a struggle. So if you want to click on next, Luke. Obviously, then the solution that I've found over that is to really pay attention to companies with common culture. That's whether it be partners, whether it's supply chain, build relationships as soon as possible when you are working with them. It sounds very obvious, but I have found that it's best to do that early on because when things go wrong, it's too late. You won't have those solid relationships built early. Having agreements in place, yes, they should be used as a last resort, but it is important to have good structured agreements in place so that you can administer them correctly as well. Setting clear goals and charters can be a help. Starting small, so collaboration doesn't have to be on a massive scale. It's almost better to start off on a small project and learn from how things have gone and grow from there. I think it's important also to be clear on what each party brings to the table. One thing that we've certainly done, I think it's worked in our advantage, is we promoted ourselves as being open to collaborate. It sounds simple, but it does make a difference that people do reach out and companies do have approached us on the back of that message being out there on the market. And of course, joining relevant industry bodies can help with finding the right partners as well. Next slide, Luke. And you can run this through. So on the left-hand side is my reflection really on what I've seen happening, the historical way collaboration wasn't happening, I guess, in the UK market. What you had single stage procurement, for example, which is very, very costly for contractors and supply chain. You had historically been adversarial or transactional relationships, lump sum contracts, which is brings with a lot of risk, claims-driven culture, maybe little feedback on performance, and the contractor taking all the risk. And what you see now, and on the bottom of the screen there, you can see a key driver for Ofwat. One of the 3 strategic goals is to drive the water companies to meet long-term challenges through increased collaboration and partnerships. And what I am seeing now, I think this is only going one way, is an improvement. And you're seeing things like 2-stage procurement, so the less costly and you have more chance of success. And it also brings the contractors and supply chain in earlier. You have more market engagement, communication about new ways of procurement. You have an enterprise and Project 13 approach. That's a more collaborative approach, where you work together as an enterprise, and we're having that was started really in Angling Water, in the water sector, and now we're actually involved in that on our framework with Yorkshire Water, where there's actually direct allocated projects, less mini competitions, working together with other partners to find the best way forward for the entire AMP period. I mentioned about early contractor and supply chain involvement. So that's a real big driver we've seen, and that's it's encouraging to see that. Target cost contracts with pay and gain share as well, that reduces risk. Early warnings, are obviously a key driver of collaboration rather than going back with claims later on. Clients are giving much more feedback, and there's much more risk sharing and collaborative planning, let's say, on a project level. Next slide, Luke. And you can play that through. So in terms of innovation, then, these I've set out a couple of the high level goals here, which you'll be very familiar with, that the industry is looking to achieve over the coming years. And so you've got water quality compliance. So that's obviously a major issue. We saw some of the issues lately with discharges and things like that. Zero interruptions to this water supply. Zero harm from emerging pollutants. That's a huge driver over the coming years. Microplastics and emerging pollutants as well. I'm actually at a micropollutants conference here at the moment, which is on later today with British Water. So very keen to see what's being said there, about where the industry is going there. Having enough water, believe it or not, it's surprising to hear, but there's a potential serious lack of water going forward. So reuse, even through wastewater. I know Southern Water are looking to build a massive project there over the coming years to reuse water. Reducing freshwater abstractions, zero uncontrolled discharges, net zero carbon, we've heard already. Resource recovery is a massive driver over the coming years, and reducing leakage is an ongoing battle that requires innovation. Next slide, Luke. And you can see, Ofwat are definitely committed and seeking to drive innovation over the coming years. And the bottom there, you can see they've set up a 200 million innovation fund. So I think if you've got something innovative that you think will fit or address some of the needs, then I think it's worth looking into that. You'll find it very, very readily, and seeing if it's something you should apply for and seek some funding to pursue it. But some of the challenges that that I've seen in regards to innovation on the left-hand side will be framework suppliers, and it's not necessarily the framework suppliers, but it's the fact that there's frameworks set up. Often these frameworks are set up for 5 years, but they're repeated, and it's the same people that are there every time. So if you're trying to break in with a new type of product or a better way of doing something, it's very, very challenging. It can be almost seen as a closed shop. Asset standards, they serve a fantastic purpose, but they also can be restrictive in terms of bring in innovation, lack of deviation from outline designs or willingness to deviate from outline designs. There's a risk-averse industry. Standardization is obviously the opposite of innovation in some cases. Decision-making time can be very, very slow. If you bring in anything new, it can take years. There's obviously a lot of pushback from operations. So the operations, which generally sits with the water companies, they push back quite a lot on any new changes or innovation. And obviously low margins means for companies it can be difficult to actually fund internal R&D. What I think there's a move towards, or where things will be going to, is obviously funding of innovation, which we can see Ofwat committing to. I think that route to market needs to be publicised and made clear. I think that's something that often people have struggled with, is when they have something innovative, where do you bring it? I think, you know, contractors like ourselves and others have to get better, and water companies to get better at being clear about how to access, or if you have something innovative, what challenge to bring it through. Having innovation not just as a KPI, but you know, actually thoughts that's actually seeking innovation, not just have people, you know, ticking a box by writing a paper on something that's intellectually curious. You know, there's alternative procurement where risk is shared a bit more with someone who's bringing in innovation. Further collaboration with clients, contractors, and supply chain, and obviously incentivization will be a key one to drive innovation going forward. You can move on there, Luke. Final slide. So a couple of the approaches that we took as a business was, firstly, and we found it very effective over the last few years, is it sounds simple, but creating time for innovation is key. You know, we treat it like a safety moment. We have at the start of the meeting, our safe to share at the start of the meeting, but you have to create time for innovation, have it on the agenda of a management meeting or something like that. There's many ways to do it, but you know, that's what we've really embedded into our DNA, the idea of being innovative. We've been very active in innovative scouting and matching innovation to market challenge requirements. So we've been actually looking out and attending seminars, you know, seeing where the industry is going and looking to move in that direction. We developed an internal process, a very simple process to actually process innovation and move in or out as quickly as possible, because in this industry, you know, time is precious and you can't waste time chasing the wrong type of innovation. We've sought to really challenge asset standards and outline designs, and we've done that successfully. We've tried to treat innovation not just looking at technologies, but also innovate on the smallest of processes that we might have internally. We've also tried to take the end user point of view, so that's the operator's point of view when looking to bring in an innovation. And also, very simply, we've promoted ourselves as a technology and technology integrator and being an innovative business, which in itself attracts innovation and people who have developed innovative technologies. So that's it in a nutshell. But obviously, if there's any questions that you might have, you know, I think we have a Q&A session later on, so I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I think before I just jump onto this value for money part of the presentation, which actually is the real nub of what the people who are listening to the webinar can actually try and bring to the water sector here in the UK, is just, we've just heard from 3 businesses who have listened to what the regulator was looking for, who have talked internally and talked with the water companies and talked with the main contractors and the tier 1 consultants, talked to their supply chain, recognize what they have within their portfolio, and they brought that to the marketplace. And what that has meant for all those businesses, they've become very successful in the UK water sector. And the message that I'd want to pass to people listening to this webinar is, if you have things that you believe will bring value to the UK water sector, providing you approach it in the right way, then you can actually really benefit. As you can see, there's lots of money to be spent in the next 2.5-3 years, and in effect there'll be a similar amount in the 5 years beyond that. Next slide. Thanks, Luke. So what does adding value in the water sector mean? And it isn't just about money. It isn't just about in effect giving customers cheaper bills. It's actually protecting the environment. It's reducing carbon, and it's growing resilience within the sector. That all adds value. absolutely using digital technologies, as Total Mobile told you about, and there must be a myriad of other digital technologies that can be used. We're absolutely looking to enhance customer service levels using CMEX, but using world-class customer service techniques. Collaboration is absolutely critical between clients, between Severn Trent, between Thames, between Anglian, between the supply chain. The use of new technologies, collaborating across geography is exceptionally beneficial. You know, in the past, we would have two businesses working together in two different towns, but they wouldn't collaborate because they were working for two different clients. We need to break those barriers down. And innovation, what is happening in other sectors, in other businesses, in other countries that we can bring to the sector to add value? We need to take appropriate risks that goes with that. Clearly, we need to look to cut costs, collaborating, innovating, and using digital technologies, as has been explained by the three gentlemen before me, will absolutely cut costs. We need to drive efficiency into everything we do. The water sector was previously seen as a sponge, which was very full of water. It needs to be squeezed and squeezed dry, like a lot of other sectors in the UK. And the supply chain needs to grow. It is in effect under capacity right now. And the sector needs to take risks. And we can all help with that taking risks mentality. Next slide, thanks, Luke. So we talked about the supply chain needing to grow. It absolutely needs capacity. The whole sector, including the clients, the tier one, and even the tier two contractors have said that there is not enough capacity, particularly post-COVID, to deliver the programmed work. There is a real view that we have had to squeeze 5 years work into 4 years. And there's a real view that a lot of that won't get completed by 2025, and therefore we'll need to run on, which means we just need more capacity. They need more resources, more people, more hands on deck, so to speak. If people have got facilities, if they do DFMA, design for manufacture and assembly, if they fabricate off-site, those sort of facilities are needed by the sector as they're needed by other sectors. And we need to think of new ways of working. The sector also needs capability, new process technology. And what do I mean by that? Well, technologies that treat water that can be innovative. Paul Gardner mentioned a couple, Sean mentioned a couple. There must be others that are being used elsewhere that we can bring to the sector. Digital technologies that we've not thought of that could be beneficial to the water sector. How do we reduce carbon? It isn't just the everyday ways, there has to be different ways of doing it. We need to save energy, and obviously we need to find ways to improve the environment more than we are doing. How do we find world-class customer service philosophies outside of the water sector and bring it in? And wherever we can think of new approaches, we should do that. So far as innovation concerned, I know that you guys can bring ideas. It's been demonstrated by Total Mobile, by EPS, by Glenagua. If you bring new ideas, they will start to translate the sector. And if you collaborate like these guys do, you can bring what you do in other sectors into the water sector, and it will be beneficial not only for the sector, but for you as individual businesses. Next slide, thanks, Luke. So what can you do following this webinar? Either you've attended it or it's been sent to you via the newsletter on email. What can you do? You can think about, as was mentioned in the presentation, strategic growth plans. How do you come up with a plan to market what you do using timescales and actions? You can use direct contact with the water companies, and we'll come to them in a minute, and the consultants or contractors, but you can also use Enterprise Ireland. You can use their support. You can actually use their financial power and their contacts to help you to A, put together a plan, and then B, to implement the plan. Next click. You can approach the water companies direct. All these water companies now have innovation managers and innovation teams, and they're looking for innovations that are developed or they're proven. They're looking for digital technologies. They're looking for carbon and environmental improvements. You can contact them direct. You can also talk to their procurement teams about what's the future workload, what are the values, what are the rates, how does the programs work, so you can get an idea to help you to build your plan. Next click, thanks Luke. You can talk to the tier 1 consultants. So these are the Atkins, Mott MacDonald, Stantec, Arups, AECOM, Jacobs. The list goes on about what projects they're involved in, what innovations you have, what problems have they got that they are looking to fix. Any ideas that you might have, their ears are very open to hear to help them to solve the problems that they've got. Next click, Luke. And you can talk to tier 1 and tier 2 contractors and some SMEs about particular projects they've got and how you can help them to save money, to save time, to bring innovations. At least a couple of the businesses that are on this webinar today sit in that tier 1 and tier 2 contractors box, and I'm sure they'd love to hear from you about what you can bring. Next slide, Luke. So I tend to use this slide quite regularly when I am on these sort of webinars, just to show the amount and the number and the range of businesses that are looking for help and support in the UK water sector. Clearly, there are probably another 200 or 300 others that operate at maybe whatever would be called tier 3 and below. But straight away here, you've probably got the best part of 15 to 20 billion pounds of spend going through these businesses in the next 2.5 to 3 years. All of these businesses are looking for help. They're all looking for support. And if I was just going to point out two, in the middle, you'll see Clean Tech Civils and WEW. They are partners with Enterprise Ireland. They came to the UK sector less than 18 months ago, looking to see what they can do. Those businesses have secured a framework on the Northumbrian Water AMP7, and working together along with EPS, who you heard from Sean earlier, are actually now delivering their first project for them, which could be in excess of £5 million by the time it's finally nailed down. So it just shows that if you put a plan together, you put the time and the effort in, then you can be successful in the UK water sector. And I would encourage each and every one of you to look very closely at the opportunity. Next slide, thanks, Luke. If you need to talk to me direct, you can. My contact details are there, but obviously you can talk me directly through to Enterprise Ireland if you want to get some help and support. And I will now pass you to Luke, who will talk about the future.
Thanks, Lee. So just by way of introduction, for those of you I maybe haven't met, my name is Luke Newcomb and I'm a market executive with Enterprise Ireland. I'm based in our London office, and I work with Dara, working with companies who export to the UK water sector. So obviously the last few speakers have kind of talked about the current landscape of the sector, current opportunity in the investment cycle. I'm going to chat you through AMP8, some of the kind of key themes that we expect during the incoming investment cycle, and then finally how Enterprise Ireland can support your company as an Enterprise Ireland client in kind of doing business in the sector. So to begin, I suppose just some background into AMP8 and what to expect kind of in the lead up to the cycle. So like the other AMP cycles, this one will last 5 years, and it'll begin when the current AMP7 cycle ends in April 2025, and it'll last until 2030. When we look at the value of the current AMP cycle back in 2019, Ofwat set out a spending package worth around £51 billion. We expect the next cycle to fall pretty much in line with that, with around £50 billion worth of spending expected to be set out by the regulator between 2025 and 2030. And while the cycle will begin in 2025, plenty will be going on prior, kind of gearing up for the beginning of the investment cycle. As you can see here, we expect the water companies to kind of start looking for framework partners in preparation for the AMP cycle at some point next year in 2023. And this process of kind of selecting framework partners to take up to kind of 2 years. covers everything, as you can see here, kind of HC of services. And during this time, you know, the frameworks can be worth anything kind of between £500,000 a year up to £100 million a year. So plenty of opportunity for companies across the board to do business in the sector. Here we have a list of kind of expected themes for AMP8. As you can see, a lot of these themes are actually continuations of some of the themes we chatted through today. So firstly, we obviously have enhanced environmental protection. So as Sean mentioned, the sector is very committed to environmental protection. We have the kind of commitment to net zero, which is quite evident with the 2030 roadmap, when the sector became the first kind of sector to set out a sector-wide roadmap to net zero. As well as that, there is the sector is set to invest £2.8 billion in environmental projects as part of kind of green recovery investment package. So we expect this focus on the environment to continue into the next cycle, with obviously the areas of kind of net zero and carbon being looked at, as well as pollution incidents, discharges, sludge, and nature-based solutions also being key issues under this theme. Customer service is another area where we expect to see that kind of continuation of the theme. So in the previous cycle, Ofwat stated that providing an excellent customer experience for customers is fundamental for maintaining trust and confidence in the sector. Lee also mentioned the introduction of CMEX, so a measure of kind of customer experience designed to incentivize water companies to provide an excellent customer experience. So with this kind of incentive in place, we'd expect this again to remain a priority, with plenty of opportunity in the area as we head to 2025. Ofwat also stated for the incoming investment cycle, they would like to see companies kind of maximize their use of digitalization and data as well, and to kind of keep pace with the digital transformation of the wider economy. So we can see the opportunity there at the moment, as Jared chatted through, and we expect this again to be a big area of spending over the coming years. Again, we have collaboration and innovation, which Paul chatted through. Again, we're expecting large amounts of spending to be allocated for this area. While the sector has been traditionally quite risk averse, which has been mentioned previously in the webinar, there has been quite a big commitment to innovation over the last number of years. The most recent example kind of being the collaborative sector-wide effort to establish Spring, an innovation accelerator which helps innovators get their ideas directly to the end customer and help stakeholders from across the industry to work together to solve problems in an innovative way. And I suppose these developments just highlight the sector's commitment to innovation and the fact that it will be a priority over the coming years. Finally, we have a reduction in customer bills, I suppose quite topical at the moment, but how can the supply chain help in driving down bills through efficiency and within that then increasing customers' value for money? So obviously there are plenty of opportunities for companies, as I mentioned. Those themes are but a few, there could be more issues kind of popping up over the next number of years. So there's plenty of opportunities for companies to get involved and I suppose do business in the UK water sector. And on screen is just an example of, I suppose, a few of the sorts of companies that'll be in high demand, everything from sort of technology providers to environmental consultants to customer service professionals. The opportunity is not limited to these areas, and these are the kind of priorities we'd see at the moment. And if you would like to, I suppose, explore whether there is opportunity for your company under one of these categories, or even if you would just like to see, I suppose, what opportunity is there for your company in the sector, feel free to reach out to either myself or Dara at Enterprise Ireland, and we'll be happy, I suppose, to chat that through. And then finally, here we have just some more ways in which we can support you as an Enterprise Ireland client. And so firstly, we aim, I suppose, to keep you constantly informed of developments in the sector and any opportunities that may be relevant to your company. So we do this in a number of ways. Firstly, through kind of information sessions similar to this. And in 2023, we plan to hold an in-depth information session on AMP8, looking at the opportunities for companies in the next investment cycle. We also currently have our AMP7 contract details database. So this is a database which keeps track of framework agreements and framework partners of the water companies in the sector, as well as upcoming contract opportunities. And so if you're an Enterprise Ireland client and you'd like access to this document, please get in touch with myself and I can arrange that for you. Next, we also send out a quarterly newsletter to keep our clients up to date on kind of the latest trends in the sector. As well as this, we have a strategic partnership with British Water, and so they are one of the key trade bodies in the sector. And this grants clients access to various services of British Water on Enterprise Ireland's behalf. So if you'd like to learn more about this, please let either myself or Dara know. Finally, Enterprise Ireland can provide strategic support for companies looking to do business in the water sector. So we currently have a partnership agreement with Lee, who spoke earlier on in the webinar. So this allows us to facilitate a consultancy engagement with Lee. Lee has decades of experience in the sector. He works with companies to develop a refined strategy focusing on the water sector. Many clients have taken advantage of this offering and feedback has been extremely positive. Many clients have seen strong results in the sector. If you have any other queries, feel free to get in touch with either myself or Dara Cotter. So you can find our emails on screen at the moment. We're always happy to have a discussion around the sector, your company's offering, where it might fit in. So feel free to reach out to either of us if you have any questions. And that's all for myself. So I think now we're going to head over to the Q&A.
Thanks. Thanks, Luke, and thanks to all the speakers. So I think if everyone can come off mute and turn their cameras on, that'd be great. I appreciate we're 5 or 6 minutes overrun, but hopefully if we take another 5 or 6 minutes, we won't keep you from other pressing issues. So if you can, please do stay with us for another few minutes as we run through some questions. Just a quick reminder as well, if you do have a question, there is the Q&A or chat function on the sidebar, so please do filter them through there. So first question, I might, and Luke, I know you'll be kind of coming in after me with questions that you have there as well. But the first question I might just put to you, Paul. When we speak about collaboration in the water sector and in the industry, do you think there's an opportunity, a greater opportunity, I should say, for Irish companies to work more closely together to bring a more comprehensive service offering to the UK water sector? Is that something that you would think we should see or you'd like to see?
No, I think definitely. I think there's a massive opportunity and driven by necessity. You know, I think there's, you know, across the board there's a shortage in capacity in supply chain. So that's, you know, very a simple driver of the need. But I think, you know, there is a desire to collaborate going forward, and it is going to be pushed as a strong agenda across the industry. And obviously there's a need to innovate. So I think there's a lot of things going in the favor of further collaboration and openness to new businesses with new ideas and with new offerings. I think definitely, you know, I think there's those three things alone will obviously dictate that's an openness in that regard. So absolutely, yeah.
If I can just add a little bit to that, I guess as somebody that works with, excuse me, a number of different Irish clients, one thing that Paul mentioned quite often in his presentation was about having complementary cultures, and it may seem obvious that Irish businesses seem to have complementary cultures, but English businesses don't necessarily have complementary cultures. But what I find is the Irish guys, they do have complementary cultures and they really like to work together. So I actually think it makes the business stronger because they are from Ireland. And I don't mean that in the sense of being pro-Irish, it just as they come from the same approach and they have the same philosophies, which actually means they're a stronger team together.
Absolutely. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Lee. Luke, do you have a question there?
Yeah, so the issue of sort of building relationships and trade bodies networking has kind of come up throughout the webinar. How important would you say, I suppose, networking and trade bodies in the sector are to sort of doing business? And if you're a company who maybe is just starting out in the sector, where would be the best place to start in this sense?
Maybe Sean, you might be best placed to take that one, considering your position
Yeah.
with British Water.
Yeah, I kind of went the whole hog on this. Yeah, absolutely essential from the off. When we came into the sector in the early days, we recruited a few key people over here, and one of whom was already heavily embedded in British Water. And we found that was a really complementary thing to have, in addition to the supports we got from Enterprise Ireland. So we found Enterprise Ireland were helping to push us out from Ireland, if you like, and giving the supports at that end. But you need something that pulls you at the UK side, which obviously you guys provide a bit more nowadays. But something that really draws you into the sector, gives you ready access to networking, to useful information, and to the events and other things that are going on in the sector. And you need that to keep your finger on the button, to plan ahead, know where the sector's going, and to some degree to get counselling from other contractors who are in the same boat as you when things are getting frustrating. Now, my own experience was that I found it so valuable. I realised that the more I gave, the more I got from it. So 4 or 5 years ago, I kind of put myself forward with the UK forum in British Water, and I've managed to go on a journey there over the last 2 or 3 years, where I've been vice chair, the chair. I'm now what they call the immediate past chair, and I'm running a thing called a supply chain task force in British Water, which is really about improving the lot for the tier 2 and 3 supply chain in particular in the sector, and taking away some of the barriers to innovation and progress for us. So, but as I say, everything I've given, I've received back in spades. And I'm not talking about contracts on a plate. I'm talking about access to networks, access to very influential people in the business, and getting to know people like Lee, because that all happened through British Water as well. So I think that's absolutely crucial. So collaboration shouldn't just be company to company. It should be, you need this kind of higher level pan-industry collaboration, which you can really get through something like British Water. And they also give a good platform for showcasing innovation for those that are bringing that kind of thing to the market too.
Obviously, if I could add to that, I was a director of British Water for 14 years and saw nothing but value in that role. I think the one point, and Sean just sort of alluded to it a little bit at the end, the other thing that it gets you above everything else that he said is it gets you access to influential people. And we all know in the businesses that we work, a lot of it is about the people that you can get access to. If you can get access to the right people and you've got the right capabilities and the right technology and the right whatever, then you'll be successful. If you've got all those things, but you can't get to the right people, it's harder. So I would support British Water. There are other organisations that you can consider as well, but getting access to the right people is critical.
Thanks, gents. Ger, I might just go to you next, actually. Look, you spoke about digital solutions being a key enabler for all the other priorities in the sector that Ofwat have set out. From your experience, how do supply chain companies get their digital solutions onto the radar of water companies? What if you were to give 1 or 2 tips to other Irish companies, what would they be?
Yeah, well, actually, it tends to happen in reverse, that the water companies are mandating that their supply chain partners adopt digital technology, because what they're doing is they're looking for more and more real-time updates coming from the field. So if a customer calls in, reports a leak, they want to be, if that customer rings back a couple of hours later, they want to be able to give a live update as to what's happening. So the supply chain partner has to have received that fault electronically. They need to have been able to schedule and dispatch that out to a field team, and that field team has to have accepted the job and indicate that they're on way or when they're likely to be there. So that, and then when they do get there and repair the leak, you know, that they're recording that and noting exactly when service restoration has happened. So it all points along the chain. There's live updates going back into the water company, into their call center, onto their ERP system, so that they can give live updates back to the client. So it's part of the customer-centric approach, putting the customer at the center of everything that the water companies do. And that approach feeds into the digital agenda and pushing the digital agenda out to all the supply chain partners.
Great, cheers, Ger. Luke, I think there's another question coming in on the chat there.
Yeah. So a question in the chat, are increased material costs creating a risk to value for money and lowering bills? And possible review the water companies for intended projects? I don't know if anyone wants to take that.
Sean put his hand up. Sean put his hand up, so I'll let him go, which means I don't have to.
Perfect.
No, more than happy to talk about that. Yeah, we are in unprecedented times at the moment in terms of raw material costs, and that's having a knock-on impact into component costs now. And it is driving up the cost to deliver. You know, we have seen some stubbornness in certain quarters of the water companies, but in the main, they're very understanding of where we are. I think ultimately it will lead to them being able to deliver a little bit less for the money that they have available. But what it will also do on the flip side is probably open up more innovation avenues, more opportunities for value offerings that people can bring to the market. They may be a little bit more flexible on technical standards, for example, in order to deliver a particular outcome for less money. So it's how you play that game, I think, is very important. And we found that if you're upfront with them about material costs, you act reasonably in terms of your pricing validity time and your terms and conditions, and seek to bring value and work with them to deliver the same outcomes for the same money, even though the cost base is higher. That's going to work in your favor. So yeah, it may have a little bit of a pinch in terms of the overall spend and availability in the coming years, but you know, it's also an opportunity to shine, is what I would say to people.
Anyone like to add anything there?
I think I'd like to also add that everybody on this call should be very thankful that they work in a sector that was COVID proof. A lot of businesses didn't do anything for 18 months. They had to make people redundant, and they had to, you know, in effect, cut their cost to zero. We happen to work in a sector that has proved to be COVID proof, maybe not at maximum capacity, but we've all worked and continued to work through it. So one thing I would say, having worked in this industry for lots of years, as Luke pointed out earlier, that it is very, very resilient, and it always finds a way to deliver what needs to be delivered. It needs to get better at managing its customers. It does need to get better at the environment and carbon, but overall, it's a fantastic place to be. And that's a message I'd like to give to the people on. It's a great place to work, as I'm sure Sean, Paul and Joe would concur with.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lee.
Great. I am conscious of the time. It is approaching 11:20, so I think it's probably time for us to wrap up. I can see the numbers are dropping slightly, so I'm sure people have meetings scheduled that they need to get to. I just want to first of all thank all today's speakers, Sean, Paul, Ger, and Lee. Thank you very much for your input and your time. It's greatly appreciated. And again, as I said earlier, you are the shining lights of the Irish supply chain, so it's great to have your insights. I just want to reiterate again Luke's point about Enterprise Ireland's support in the water sector. If you are a company that's looking to further embed yourself in the industry, or indeed you're looking to enter into the UK water market, please do get in touch with us and Lee, and we'll be happy to support you on your journey. But for now, I just want to say I hope the next time we all meet will be in person. I think the days of webinars are slowly and surely dwindling, but hopefully we'll get together in person soon and have a much lengthier engagement, I guess. So again, thank you very much to everyone for joining today, and hopefully see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody. Speak soon.
See you.